Welcome to Jyotish with Marc Boney. Marc is an internationally renowned teacher, author, and practitioner of the ancient astrological science of India. He is known for his engaging teaching and writing style and his ability to communicate the complex concepts of Jyotish in a clear, understandable way. Now, here is Marc Boney.
Namaste everyone, my name is Marc Boney and I'm here to talk to you today about a series of classes that I'm going to be teaching online starting in June entitled The Foundations of Jyotish. I had the privilege of teaching this sacred science for the last 20 years, students at all levels, and one of my observations is that when people go to absorb this subject, too often they do it in a rather disjointed sort of way. They pick up different pieces. This could be from teachers, it could be from reading books, could be from videos online. And the result is that they absorb a lot of information, but it's a rather undigested mass that they can't very usefully apply, and as a result they end up somewhat frustrated. In my view, the solution to this is to learn Jyotish in a very systematic, structured way, in what I would call a progressed learning way, where one concept builds upon the other. And this is my intention now in presenting this series of classes called the Foundations of Jyotish. The intention is to give students a very sound understanding, in-depth understanding of the fundamentals that then become a foundation from which to build upon. So far in 2016, I've been teaching much more advanced topics, but I've had a lot of requests from all over the world for people to teach this more basic level. And I've decided to do that, and I'm actually rather excited about it. The reason is that, if you just learn the fundamentals, the basics very well, you would be surprised as the amount of very accurate information, accurate inferences that you can draw upon when looking at a chart, yours or anyone else. And so to sort of illustrate this idea, I'm showing you here the chart of Donald Trump, someone very much in the news these days, mostly for being what looks to be the Republican candidate for the upcoming U.S. Presidential election. But as many of you may know, throughout most of his life, what he's been known for is that as being a very successful real estate entrepreneur, hugely successful. There's actually features of his chart that very clearly indicate his destiny, that if you just knew the basics of Jyotish, you'd be able to see that. But before I start talking about those, I'm aware that maybe some people viewing this are pure beginners when it comes to Vedic astrology. So let me just give you a quick orientation to a Vedic astrology chart. What you're seeing here is not actually two charts. It's the same birth chart, only different representations of that. On this side here we have what's called the South Indian style. On the other side is the North Indian style. I prefer the South Indian style, so I'll be focusing primarily on that. But first of all, what does an astrological chart consist of? Well, first and foremost, it consists of the planets. And when we say the planets, we're actually referring to the sun and the moon, the 5 planets that can be visible with the naked eye through Saturn, and also 2 strange characters called Rahu and Ketu, which are the Sanskrit words for the north and south node of the moon. These are what's referred to as the 9 grahas, right? The 9 entities that are utilized in Jyotish, and they're represented in the chart, as you can see here, through their abbreviation. So you have SU here, which of course means the sun, and then you have MO here, which of course stands for the moon. MA would be for Mars, and so on. And then you see here that the chart consists of what looks like 12 boxes. Right? These boxes are what's called the houses of the horoscope. They're numbered 1 through 12. You'll see that with Donald Trump's chart, his first house, or the first box labeled number 1 here is over here on this side. And the houses represent different areas of life experience that anyone living any time typically would have. In other words, the sum total of experiences one could have can theoretically be classified in terms of these 12 houses. For example, the first house just represents you as an individual, as an embodied self, as a personality, whereas the house just opposite here represents the significant other or the spouse, all right, or the partner. The 10th house of the horoscope represents one's life in the world, one's profession, and one's career life, whereas the opposite house represents the home, and so on and so forth, just to give you a feel for this idea of the houses and how they mean and what they represent in astrology. Now, overlaid upon each house is one zodiacal sign, and this overlay of the zodiacal signs onto the houses comes about by a person being born at an exact time and an exact location. You may have heard the term rising sign or the ascending sign. What that refers to is that because all celestial bodies rise in the east and set in the west from our geocentric point of view, at any location, at any time, some constellation, some sign is said to be rising up over the local horizon, over the ascendant. And this is a very key point in the chart. This identifies the patterning. And in Trump's case, all right, at the moment of his birth, given the place that he was born in New York, he had the sign Leo rising. So Leo becomes the first house, and therefore the progression of the zodiac and its connection to the houses goes accordingly. And then, of course, the planets at the time of his birth all were to be found in some particular sign and then falling in some particular house. And this is the kind of thing that gets interpreted when we're looking at an astrological chart. So talking about a distinctive feature of Trump's chart that is indicative of his involvement, major involvement in real estate, is the fact that the planet, one of the planets associated with his fourth house, said to be the ruler of the fourth house. Every house has a sign associated with it, and every sign has a ruler. So we could look at Trump's chart and see that the planet who rules his fourth house is the planet Mars. And where do we see it situated? We see it situated in the first house, which again represents the individual themselves. So it creates this connection between real estate, represented by the fourth house and the fourth lord, and himself, represented by the first lord, or the first house, which is where his Mars is. It actually goes beyond that. If you understood the basics of astrology, you would realize that one of the things that Mars signifies, and one of its terms used in the ancient classics of Jyotish to describe Mars, was Bhumisutto, which means Lord of Lands. So in his chart, not only is it connected to his fourth house of real estate and property, but it's also a planet that by itself signifies real estate and property and land. And then by virtue of the fact that some planet isn't in some sign, that modifies that planet in how it can express itself. And it's quite significant here that in the case of Donald Trump, his Mars falls in the sign Leo. And if you know, Leo is a regal sign. It has to do with royalty. It has to do with, high status and luxury and aristocracy. That type of thing is some of the meanings associated with the sign Leo. And if you know anything about Trump's properties, that you know that they're all luxury properties, high-end properties that are places that appeal to extremely wealthy people that have a very high social economic standing. And this is one of the things we could understand by seeing his Lord of the fourth house in the sign Leo. Now, there's more to it than that, right? But I'm just showing you something basic with regards to how this major destiny to be involved in real estate and these high-end properties, and to have a personal identification with these. Some of you may know that most of his properties bear his name. We have things like Trump Towers and so forth. So there's a personal identification between his property that he owns and then also himself. So because he's quite the individualist, some might say egomaniac. Another very distinctive feature of his chart, you might say, is the fact that it reflects the potential for considerable wealth. One thing we know about Donald Trump is that he's very wealthy. a billionaire, at least he claims to be so, and I don't doubt it. And so one would expect to see those factors in the chart that are said to indicate this sort of thing to be well situated for him, and of course that's the case. Two of the houses most associated with money in the chart are the second house, which for him is Virgo down here, and also the 11th house, which is for him Gemini. The second house particularly has to do with earned income, right? And it's referred to as Dhanabhava, or house of wealth. And then the 11th house is referred to as Labdhabhava, which means the house of gains of all variety. And so if someone is going to be well off financially or have the karma of this, to be able to achieve this, it's very beneficial to have favorable factors related to your second and to the 11th house. Now, in Trump's case, if we focus in on the 11th house here for a moment, you'll see the planet Mercury there in the sign Gemini. So each of the planets are said to have their lordship or rule some sign that's their own sign. And for Mercury, it is the planet, it is the sign Gemini. So to have, and again, something you'd learn if you were studying the basics of Jyotish is that to have a planet in its own sign is a favorable condition. Then the house and everything it represents is said to be able to give its results strongly and favorably. Now, in the case of Mercury, for anyone with the Leo ascendant like Trump, Mercury has a particular money-giving ability because it's the planet who both rules the second house of income and the 11th house of gains. And so to have Mercury, for anyone with this Lagna situated in Gemini in the 11th house, as it is for Trump, is very, very favorable with regards to one's fortunes financially. Now, we also see here Jupiter, which is said to be one of what's called the natural benefics in Jyotish. All the planets are classified in terms of two basic classifications of natural benefics, planets that can bring benefit, enjoyable, in good karmas, you might say, and then natural malefics, which can, under certain instances, bring more negative karmas. And you see here Jupiter, one of those natural benefics, falling in his second house of earned income. But also there are certain houses of the birth chart that are designated, to use the Sanskrit words, as Lakshmi Sthanas. Anyone familiar with the Indian spiritual tradition knows that Lakshmi is the goddess of wealth and prosperity and abundance. And so certain houses of the birth chart are designated as what's called Lakshmi Sthanas, or places of goddess Lakshmi. These are the houses 1, 5, 9. And then, of course, they're all going to have some sign associated with that house, and that sign's going to have some planet that rules, therefore, that house. Now, for Trump, his fifth house is Sagittarius, said to be ruled by Jupiter. And we see Jupiter here placed in the second house of earned income. This is referred to as a dhan yoga, or a combination that can bring wealth, which in his case it certainly has. And just to give you, again, more ideas about how one can extract meaning just from seeing some basics about a chart. I remember when I first discovered that there was information about Donald Trump's birth time based on a birth certificate, a written record. I remember first using a computer program to calculate the chart, sort of examining the patterns there, because even though the birth time come from a written record, as my Jyotish guru says, every birth chart has to prove itself in terms of the life patterning and the timing of events in a person's life. So one of the things I was looking at is that for him, the planet that rules his seventh house of marriage and of the spouse is the planet Saturn, right? And even that house is empty, but it doesn't mean one doesn't have an experience in that area. It just means that in order to understand the kind of karma and experience one might have, we would look for what planet rules that house. In his case, it's Saturn, and we see here it placed over in Cancer, which is his 12th house. Now, I just told you that the planet who rules the 7th house has to do with the spouse, right? Well, one of the meanings of the 12th house is foreign countries. And it's, of course, a matter of record that he's been married 3 times, but 2 of those wives have been foreign-born. His first wife, Ivana, was from Czechoslovakia, and his current wife, Melania, comes from Slovenia. But there's more to it than that. You'll see that his planet who rules the 7th house of the spouse also is with the planet Venus. Now, Venus, mythologically, the goddess of love and beauty and all that, is a planet associated with the beauty industry, with beautiful things and beautiful people. And as you may be aware, these 2 wives that were foreign-born were both previously models and in the beauty and fashion industry before they actually married Donald Trump. So again, this is this idea of the Lord of the 7th house of spouse in the 12th house of foreign countries with Venus, the planet of beauty, is the astrological configuration, you might say, in his chart that shows this karma, this destiny that he's had of having foreign spouses who were previously models, beautiful women. So just as an example, just knowing those basics of astrology, which planets rule which signs, which houses have what meaning, some of the significations of the planets themselves, you can extract meaning like this. Another really, really important part of a chart is the planet who is ruling the first house, because I had mentioned earlier that the first house represents the individual themselves. So this becomes a really critical, important factor in the chart. I mentioned that his ascending sign, or his first house, is the sign Leo, said to be ruled by the sun. And we see in Trump's case that the sun is very well placed. It's in the 10th house, which is the house of the profession, house of the career. And again, one of the basics of Jyotish that you'd be learning is that the sun is said to be situated in a very strong place when it goes to the 10th house. It's said to get something called directional strength, because he was born close to noon when the sun is directly overhead at its height during the cycle of the day, and this makes the sun very powerful. So it creates a situation that would indicate a powerful personality, someone who would be well known, have a very strong presence in the world. This is all indicated by the fact that the Lord of his first house, the sun, goes in the 10th. Of course, there's more to it than that. It also forms a planetary combination referred to in the ancient texts as Raja Yoga. Raja literally means king, right? A combination that can put you in a very, very high position, give you a very, very high status, which, of course, has been the case for him. So what I've been talking about thus far is what my teacher used to refer to as the static potentials in a birth chart. The other major aspect of learning Jyotish, the basics of it, is to come to understand how the timing is done, how we can look at the unfoldment of karma in a person's life and potentially see the future and predict events. And this is done through something called planetary periods, or dashas is the Sanskrit word used for that. And so it's interesting to note that Donald Trump has been running the period of his Rahu, the period of the north node of the moon, which is an 18 years period. And we see here it connected to this very, very powerful sun. And this combination of Rahu and the sun form a very powerful Raja Yoga combination. And on that basis, it would be quite predictable, really, just knowing some very simple, basic things about Jyotish, that he would enjoy considerable success and fame and renown during his Rahu period. And it's been during this time that he not just was very successful in real estate, but he became this big international reality TV star, a celebrity. And now he's contesting in the political arena with a good deal of success, much to the surprise to a lot of people. Of course, what people have been asking me, friends and family, is whether I think he's going to actually become the U.S. president. And I've thus far refrained from making any pronouncements about that. I want to see first whether Hillary Clinton and he really are the candidates, although it looks pretty certain at this point. Then I will do a video presentation information, as I'm doing now, explain why I believe one might win over the other. So that's something still to come. Coming back to this course that I'm going to be teaching, this is going to be these foundations of Jyotish is going to be presented in a series of modules, you might say, starting with the most basic elements of a birth chart, which would be, as I mentioned, the planets, the signs, the houses, the ways in which planets get connected through something called aspect, this idea of dashas or planetary periods, and so on. Now, I mentioned the most basic element of a birth chart is the planets. So this first program that I'm going to be offering starting in June will be on the planets. It's an 8-week class beginning June 19th. The details of this can be found on my website, www.marcboney.com. And this is how I'm going to begin in terms of teaching the fundamentals and establishing this foundation of Jyotish. But, it comes back to, you might say, a larger question of why anyone would choose to study this subject to begin with. So I'd like to say a little bit about that. I think if you're listening to this presentation, you're probably aware that all of astrology, and particularly this system of astrology, is based on the idea of we as souls having had previous lives. I'm talking about the idea, of course, of reincarnation, and that our experience in these lifetimes is to some degree, not completely, but to some degree, conditioned by the effects of our past thoughts, words, and actions in previous lifetimes. This is what the word karma refers to. And so I believe one of the reasons that I got attracted to astrology and to Jyotish in particular is it can give you an understanding and appreciation, I think a rather profound one, about the idea of the operation of the law of karma. And that's what the chart represents. A person's birth chart represents what's called their prarabdha karma, their karmic allotment in this lifetime. But if you have, as I have, seen and studied thousands of charts in connections to people's life experience, then karma no longer becomes some sort of philosophical idea or someone's figment of their imagination. It becomes very real for you. You see that it is a definite element in any life. Not the only element, of course, one's free will, choices you make, your efforts, and so on and so forth. Donald Trump didn't just become successful because he had the karma to become successful, which he did, but he also worked tremendously hard and really applied himself in order to achieve the success that he had. So, of course, just understanding the law of karma and its operation in general is one of the ways in which I think it's useful to study, or one of the reasons it's useful to study Jyotish. And then, of course, everyone's interested in their own karma, and learning about what your own chart says about that is a valuable way and reason for why you might want to study this subject. Now, my background, as you may be aware, is the counseling arts. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology, and throughout my life, adult life, have been in different roles where I've played the role of the counselor in some way. And I believe for someone in the counseling arts, Jyotish is a powerful tool for using for counseling. And it's the way in which I've always attempted to use it. So this becomes another reason why someone might be interested in pursuing the study of this subject. One thing my Jyotish Guru used to mention is that it helps to develop yogic concentration, referred to as dharana, the ability to focus very intently. Yes, it requires a certain, what I'd say, intellectual horsepower, but from what I've seen, most everyone with at least an average intelligence can learn Jyotish well and learn to apply the basic principles. For my Jyotish Guru, K.N. Rao, it actually was, he always referred to it as a spiritual practice for himself, a type of sadhana. I know for him it was that, and it certainly has become something of that, for myself. When I am introducing this topic to beginners, though, one thing I do say is that Jyotish is for mature audiences, I'm making a little joke about that, but essentially what I mean by that is that it does, inform you about your karma, and so you have to be prepared for that because very often or not people don't necessarily like what they may find out or everything about what they may find out. And this is what I say. There's a question there. Then is ignorance bliss or is knowledge power? Certainly for myself, I decided that knowledge was power and really wanted to know and have gone very deeply into this subject. And another reason is that it's just quite fascinating. Most people want to know what their chart says about them, but some people, like myself, get fascinated in the science. It's like the difference between wanting to know what time it is and wanting to know how the watch works. And it really is a quite fascinating subject. It's a vast ocean in terms of the amount of different interpretive techniques and approaches. But if you start with the basics and you build a good, strong, solid foundation, that's a good starting point for going on with it. And this is what I'm going to be trying to achieve through this Foundations of Jyotish program that I'm doing in a series of 8-week modules, starting with one on the planets. And so if you're interested in finding out more, again, I encourage you to visit the page on my website at www.marcboney.com. You're welcome to be in touch with me directly through the email contact that's on the website there. Or if you'd just like to register and sign up, then you're able to do that through that website page as well. So if you do decide to be involved, I welcome your participation in teaching you the foundations of Jyotish. So namaste for now, and maybe be seeing you in the future.
Learn more at www.marcboney.com.